Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Pamela, and you are watching Pam Entertainment TV, where we review movies, television series, and instance in pop culture. So I'm going to be simultaneously uh, uploading this to both of my channels because this is a TV series review. And remember, next month in January, all of my and television series review will be on my second channel, which is PETV underscore reacts. Again, it is PETV underscore reacts. All right, people. So we're getting into this. So we're getting into Sean Combs' The Reckoning. So this is a documentary. It is 4 parts. It is produced by 50 Cent. And and we all know that there's some history between 50 Cent and Sean Diddy Combs. Apparently, the footage from when he got arrested and the footage from him um, recording things while he was in New York waiting for whatever was supposed to happen. 50 Cent was able to get a copy of that. He was able to get a copy of that footage. Plus, he was able to talk to a couple of jurors, Capricorn Clark, Lil Rod Jones, Kalina from Dirty Money. Uh, what's her name? Was it Bad Barbie? Bad. I can't think of what her name is, but she was in the band. They were able to talk to her. They talked to Aubrey O'Day. They talked with posthumously. I guess it was an interview that Andre Harrell had done in regards to Sean Combs. I have my notes here, y'all. They talked with Tim Patterson, who was a friend of his. They talked with Joy Dickerson. She is a person that filed a lawsuit against him. And I'm trying to get everybody that I think that and they talked to his business partner, Kirk Burrows, as well. Let me see who else they talked to. They talked with Al B. Sure. They talked with who is Al B. Sure was an artist on Uptown, and he is Kim Porter's son Quincy's father. They talked with Roxanne Johnson, who was the wife of Craig Mack. And again, they talked with a lot of different people. So what this is going to be is a spoiler-ish review. I am not going to go through here and spoil the documentary because overall, I thought this was a well put together documentary. It was like they start from present day, which they start from present day, and then they all go back. So the first episode, which was entitled "Pain versus Love," this episode pretty much detailed Puffy's upbringing, who Puffy was, Puffy's upbringing. You know, he grew up in Mount Vernon, but he spent a lot of time in Harlem. Uh, I will go over the things that stood out to me. One of the things that stood out to me in this episode was his mother. His mother being a hustler, his mother having certain parties, because one of the things that they juxtaposed was the fact that Janice Combs was known for having parties, and they juxtaposed that with Puff Daddy loving to have parties and stuff like that. I found that to be interesting. They they didn't say it, but they alluded to the fact that they believe that his mother was a hustler and that she possibly was in the selling of the illicit mood enhancers just by the way of how she moved, and particularly how she moved in Harlem. They also talked about how she, let me see what was interesting. They also talked about how who was his name, Tim Patterson, who was a childhood friend. They talked about the beatings that Sean Combs got by the hands of his mother, which was interesting. And so the way that they put this whole episode together, in my opinion, was to go over the fact that Puffy was emulating what he saw his mother do, and he was emulating the men that he saw that his mother was around. That was part of it. They did go into a little depth because, like I said, I did not know about. I knew that there was a city college stampede, but they kind of went in to talk about what happened, uh, and how Puffy. That was the beginning of him being like the Teflon Don, the Teflon Don. Uh, because his rise came up through Uptown, and then he eventually started Bad Boy. But that was the incident that people were looking at him, and he was able to finesse his way out of, because Andre Harrell, who was his mentor at the time, was able to talk to the people at MCA Uptown to let him stay on to Uptown, but his duties changed. He was a party promoter, so they had to change his duties to where he wasn't going to be promoting them parties anymore. So they had him to become an A&R. So that was a way to get him to pay him enough money that he wasn't going to be doing all of these parties and all of these little different things that he was doing in the name of Uptown. And that was a big, big year. That was a big time because, again, Uptown had Heavy D and the Boys. It had Jodeci. It had Mary J. Blige. It had Father MC. It had EMPD. It had a lot of little stuff like that in that whole group. So that's what stood out. Another thing that stood out, and it was something that I saw basically when we watched the trial or when we listened to the trial, is that Puffy was one of those people that was a jealous person, but if he admired you as a man, somehow, some way, he wanted your woman. Or if he was pissed off at you about something, somehow, some way, he wanted your woman. Because I did not know that Misha, the first, his Justin's mother, was dating Eric Sermon from EPMD. Now he kept talking about, oh, we were just friends. Oh, we were just friends. Eric. Because you were trying to sidestep, because no one does all of that sidestepping like you were sidestepping. Y'all were dating. And then we find out again, and this is one of the things that I got from all 4 episodes. Fucking enabler. I can't stand these enabler people. You knew all this stuff was going on. You knew this stuff was going on. And no one said anything. Nothing. So you got Misa that was dating Eric EPMD. Then I don't know what Puffy did, but he got fired by Andre Harrell, and that's when he started Bad Boy. He started, and what was interesting at that, found interesting in that, is that when he founded Bad Boy, he didn't put his name on it. 75% went to his mother, and 25% went to his business partner. What was his name? Kirk. Gotta pull his name out. I think it was Kirk Burroughs. And then he finagled him out of that. But he was still dating Misa. And then I guess when he saw that, what's her name? Kim was, and he was dating other women in between there. But then I guess he wanted who Al B. Sure had. So he started dating Kim Porter. And I put on here what stood out. One of the guys called Puffy a paper gangster. He wasn't no big gangster in real life because of the fact that he was always getting his butt whooped. Particularly when he was a young boy going up to a young man. But he knew that New York bravado that he had when he started dealing with record executives and agents and stuff like that. They considered him to be like a paper gangster. Somebody said he wasn't no real gangster. He was a paper gangster. And one of the things that I said, not Puff being a jealous groupie manipulator, and this had a lot to do with him and other women, the men that he had, or the men that he was jealous of, or the men that he tried to emulate. He was very interested and taking his woman. And I said, not Puff being Drake before Drake. Because that's what stood out to me. I honestly, y'all, that's what stood out to me. Where are we? They talked about, so we got episode 2. So episode 1 was Pain versus Love. Let me see what the name of episode 2 was. I know I wrote it down. Episode 2 was What Goes Down Must Come Up. And they talked about that 1994 incident where Tupac had been shot and at the Quad Studio. Now, again, like I said, I don't know these folks. I'm just watching this documentary and just kind of going through what I believe. They were talking about the relationship between Tupac and Biggie, and the relationship between Tupac and Biggie was genuine. And I think it was genuine because, number one, they were artists and they were rappers. And people who were around that time felt like Puffy was kind of jealous of that relationship between Tupac and Biggie. I mean, even to the point that he was trying to get Tupac to work with him, and Tupac wasn't trying to work with him. Now, working with Biggie, absolutely, because I believe that they had a kinship in that regard. But I feel and I believe, like I said, I don't have any proof of this. It's just that from what you kind of conceive from his behaviors, and I'm just evaluating the behaviors from what we got the information from being at court, what other people have said about him in other documentaries through the times and everything like that. He's very jealous and controlling. So there's no way in the world that you're going to make me believe that that relationship between Tupac and Biggie didn't bother him. Because then we get to the Quad City shooting. You've got Puffy and his team and all those people calling for him to pull through. And Tupac, and these are the words that Tupac had said, that they had gotten the information, they had pulled interviews that Tupac had done. And Tupac said, well, Biggie was wanting me to come through and I was going to pull through. He said, however, they kept calling for me to come. And it didn't dawn on him at the time that this could be, that, hey, they're trying to set him up. He said it wasn't until he got there. And he said he walked in and Little C's was standing up, I guess, up on the wrap. I don't know where he was, like upstairs in the upstairs, but outside where the balcony was, so you can see down as somebody comes in the door. He said Lil C's said something. Lil C's came down to get him. And as Lil C's was coming off the elevator, this is when these robbers just showed up. And these robbers robbing Tupac, and then they shoot him 5 times. Now, what was interesting, but this is what Pac said, they didn't take his watch. And some other stuff that, he's like, why would you try to rob me and shoot me? And did nobody know he was going to be there? So it was strange how things were set up. Again, it was a studio, and again, you would see artists. So, but Tupac felt like he was set up, and I think that brought a strain between the relationship between him and Biggie. And then Tupac went to jail for the SA charges, and so he had been down. But while Tupac was in prison, he was stewing. He felt like Biggie and Puff set him up. I probably would guess to say, if he knew it was Puffy more than Biggie, I think that they could have talked it out. Biggie was getting scared at that moment too, because again, all that happened around him when he's trying to record an album. So that's what I got out of that. The business partner described some incidents where he saw the freakiness or this level of Puffy that he wasn't privy to before. Because he talked about Puffy was paging him to come to his office, and when he got to the office, he sees Puffy in the middle of getting sexual services performed on him. And when he asked, well, why did you call me to the office? He was like, oh, nothing, nothing. We'll just talk about it later. He felt like Puffy wanted him to see him do that and get his reaction to all of that. Then we get the information about from Roxanne Johnson. And this is where we started getting information about Puffy and how he was treating his artists, where, he was getting all the money and the artists weren't getting anything but the advances that they had. And then he would shuck and jive with them about money and stuff like that. So like Craig Mack was like, he got his advance, and he was Grammy nominated, but he was broke. He wanted to go on tour, but he didn't have the money and the record label, or nobody was backing him and able to go on tour. But Puffy was working with Biggie at that time, and so he was becoming disenchanted. And so this is where we see the beginning of how Puffy was treating his artists. He I can't remember if it was his childhood friend or if it was his business partner, Kirk, that said that it seemed like Puffy was jealous of actual artists because he had the ability to move the crowd. He had the ability to get the crowd to the place in the venues. He had the ability to see the big picture and put it all together. But it seemed like he was jealous because he wasn't an artist. He didn't have he didn't have the musicality. He didn't have any of all of that. He wasn't the artist. And so though he would smile and kiki in your face, there was a level of jealousy in regards to that. Episode 2, one of the things that stood out to me was that Suge Knight was Al B. Sure's bodyguard. Because I was trying to figure out how that relationship worked or did not work. But we see that Suge Knight was Al B. Sure's bodyguard. And also that is how Capricorn Clark met or knew of Puffy, because she was best friends with one of Suge Knight's children's mom. And so all of that happened. So when Suge Knight opened up Death Row, Bad Boy was competing with Death Row because he opened Death Row in 92. We find out that Death Row was courting Craig Mack. And we get this East Coast, West Coast stuff. Let's see. That was where we saw the tensions between Puff and Diddy. But they said that whole thing started out in ATL when, again, another incident of a shooting where Puffy is around, where one of Suge Knight's guys got popped and was unalived. And so they're saying that incident, according to Mark Curry, was the catalyst for this East Coast, West Coast beef. And so, again, I talked to you all about when Pac was in jail. He believed that Biggie was part of this, of his 1994 shooting, because they were saying something about somebody, one of Biggie's homeboys was the one that shot Pac. And then we find out Puffy had ties to a guy named Zip, who had ties to a gang back in LA. They go to, because then we're getting to Biggie's demise. And I'm just trying to word this. Puffy was the cause of Biggie dying, because he was trying to stick it in the face of those West Coast rappers that he could go anywhere. Because his business partner Kirk said that him and Biggie were supposed to be on a plane going to London to promote an album, and that Diddy canceled it because he wanted Biggie at a party while they were partying in LA. And Biggie's car was the first car that pulled out. And when they pulled out from the venue, that is when he was unalived. So episode 3 was Official Girl, but I wanted to talk about this. This was interesting because we as a public, I guess, again, you look how media was back in the day, and everybody didn't get the information as quickly as we can get it now. But at this point, these are the incidents that have Diddy's name, or his essence was around it. So you have the City College event, you have the Tupac shooting at the Quad City uh, studios, you get Jake being pew-pewed in ATL, and that was supposed to have been the catalyst for the East Coast West Coast beef. You have Tupac's death, you have Biggie's death, you have Shine shooting at the nightclub, pew-pewing at the nightclub, which got that woman injured in her nose, in her face. And then you have the beating of Steve Stout. Now, that was interesting because of the fact that I remember this particular thing. You Can Hate Me Now video came out, and it was with Puffy and Nas, and Puffy had a scene to where he was like being crucified like Jesus. Hezekiah Walker said, "Hey man, you can't have that. You making a mockery of Jesus and Christianity and stuff like that." So he was like, "Cool." Puffy was like, "Cool, Hezekiah. I'm gonna get it taken down." So then they go to Steve Stout to get the stuff taken down. And I guess Steve Stout said, "It's in, it's in. We're not taking nothing out." And they beat that man down to the white meat. And they go over like what happened in the Las Vegas fight and things like that. And then we get to episode 3, and this is Official Girl. So they talk about his waning relationship with Misha, and then him going with Kim Porter, talking about Kim Porter was that girl. He had a lot of issues with Kim Porter. Kim Porter would fight back until the point that she was like, "You know what? I'm not fixing to deal with this." And this is the point where we get Cassie coming into the picture as well. Because they showed an instance where there was a photo shoot when Kim Porter and Cassie was at the photo shoot. And baby, Kim Porter was like, "You know what? I'm out. I done had my twins. I'm moving to California. I'm not fixing to be, putting up with this kind of mess." And then they talked about, let's see. They talked about his, making the band. They talked about Dirty Money. They talked about the band, Danity Kane, Day 26. They also talked about, because you remember had the big issues about Aubrey O'Day and all this other stuff, and then they fired her. You come to find out that there was some incidents of where he was trying to groom her, and she just wasn't handling that. Again, they go into, as we know now, the trial, him and Cassie, him and Gina, him and 50 Cent's baby mama, Jane Doe, all of those things. We got Capricorn Clark to tell her story. One of the things that I'm going to get into episode 4, which was Blink Again. And we'll just kind of go over all my little thoughts here about what's this. So Capricorn Clark tells her story. We do have 2 of the jurors that came in. Because you remember I told you when I was covering the trial, I believed Capricorn Clark's story. But we find out that the jurors found that the story hard to believe. They found that story hard to believe. They thought that she was quite emotional, but they did believe Cassie getting her head knocked between the washers and dryer, and they do believe that he was a violent person. They said that, however, it wasn't a domestic violence case, so they could not weigh that as big as they wanted to weigh that. And it was good to hear from the jury. It was also good to hear from the bloggers. Tisa Tales was on there too, and she started talking about Diddy's PR team during the trial, because remember I told you that the bloggers on the outside seemed like they was fighting. I think it was like Armand Wiggins was there, Tisa Tales was there, and there were several other bloggers that were covering the story. But you started hearing these side things going on at the trial with certain bloggers going off on other bloggers. You started seeing Diddy's team. You had people with T-shirts and stuff like that. And that's the same thing he did, with the T-shirts and the signs. That's the same tactic he used when the nightclub pew-pewing with Shine. Little Rod came on and he told his story about what went on and everything like that. So, like I said, this was a spoiler-ish review. But overall, I thought it was a good, well put together documentary. The East Coast, West Coast beef and how that started off and the Source Wars. Those were revelations to me. The thing that stood out to me in episode 3, we had the escort talk about what was going on. So that stood out to me. What stood out in episode 4 is that we found out that Diddy got 100 civil cases against him. 100. And at the time that he was moving in on Cassie, that's when he had his Ciroc deal. Let's see. Little Rod described his the incident at the studio where a person named G that he's never seen again got pew-pewed while he was in the bathroom with Justin and his father. And they also talked about the relationship between Diddy and his sons. But lastly, I wanted to talk about the footage that we got with Diddy as he was in New York back in September of 2024. And then they arrested him for his initial arrested, but he had been there about a week. Just how he was moving at that time. You could tell he was scared. You could tell that he knew the walls were closing in on him, so to speak. And he was doing everything he could to get the PR or the narrative on his side because he was going back and forth with his lawyers about that. You got a glimpse of who he was. It wasn't that it was like he was trying to get the case dismissed before it started. But I don't think his lawyers, and you can kind of tell that his lawyers, in my opinion, as Diddy was talking to them, they weren't taking this as seriously as it was. It was almost like they thought that they could just kind of schmooze their way out of it. But Diddy was hiring everybody he could to help him, get the lesser charges as he could because, his freedom was looming. And so, you kind of saw a little fear in him and you saw him kind of work all of this out. And he was talking to witnesses and things like that. He was doing everything he could because these were the tactics that he had used for years, 20 plus years, to get him out of situations. So go watch the documentary. It's a 4-part. It goes quickly. In my opinion, it's about, I think they're anywhere about 40 minutes per episode, but it goes quickly and there is a lot of information. Like I said, this is a spoiler-ish review that I really would want y'all to get into. All right, people, we do this every week. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you care. Are y'all gonna watch this documentary? Let me know. All right, people. Please tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker, tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. And as always, people, bye-bye.